February 17th, 1946, 05:42 a.m., a frost-bitten porch on a tenant farm outside Ames, Iowa. The sky was the dull blue of a Midwest winter before sunrise, and the snow on the steps had been tamped flat by deliveries that never failed to come. Nakamura Aiko, prisoner of war 214-6J, tightened the borrowed wool coat at her throat and bent to lift the wire crate. 6 glass bottles knocked together with a clean, expensive sound she had not heard since before Saipan. Thick American glass, cream line visible, each mouth sealed with a round paper cap, stamped in English she could not read. From inside the farmhouse, a Zenith radio murmured in a calm male voice about butterfat prices and rail schedules as if wars and empires had never existed. Warm air smelling of coffee, coal heat, and laundry leaked through the doorframe. Aiko stared at the bottles. In Japan, blockade and bombing had made milk a rumor. Here the enemy delivered it to the doorstep of people who were warm, and those people trusted even a Japanese prisoner to pick it up. "Just set it by the kitchen door, honey," the farmer's wife called in a flat Iowa accent, not even opening the door, not even checking the face of the enemy. Aiko's gloved fingers tightened on the metal handle. The cold bit through, but the glass was warm from the dairy truck. The mismatch between what she had been told of Americans and this steady, unnecessary abundance made her chest feel hollow. If you're listening from somewhere else, tell us where you are, and subscribe for more stories you weren't supposed to hear. 6 weeks earlier, Camp Clarinda, Iowa. Snow had been pushed into gray ridges along the fence by the time the truck stopped. Aiko stepped down carefully, boots too large for her narrow feet, the U.S. wool trousers rough against her calves. Above the roofs of low wooden barracks, the American flag hung almost still in the cold Iowa air. It was January 1946, months after surrender, but the camp still moved with wartime discipline. Bugle, shouted roll calls, the thud of doors. She kept her eyes lowered as the military policeman read from a clipboard. Nakamura, Aiko, POW number 214-6J. His accent flattened her name. She inclined her head. Behind her, 2 other Japanese women, one older, one with bandaged fingers, waited in the wind. They had expected harsher stockades, barbed wire hunger. Instead, the fence was there, the towers were there, but the smell was of coal heat and boiled potatoes. A sergeant in a lined jacket motioned them forward. "Special work detail. Farm and dairy. You follow orders. You stay warm. You make trouble. You stay in." His voice was not cruel, just practiced. He pointed to a posted schedule on a board outside the administration hut. The words were all in English, but Aiko recognized the structure: reveille, roll, chow, detail, return. War or peace, armies loved timetables. She wanted, more than anything, to know where the boundaries were, what doors not to open, how far to step into a farmhouse, how to hand things to an American woman without offense. Shame, once triggered, was hard to endure. An American corporal issued them extra mittens, actual mittens, not rags, and jerked his thumb toward a smaller group of POWs waiting by a truck marked for town. "Dairy run," he said. "Dairy, milk, in winter." Aiko fell in with the others, breath white in the air. If this was to be her routine, she would learn it perfectly. The faster she learned, the less she would be noticed, and the less she would lose. The truck smelled of wet canvas and cold iron when they reached the dairy. Steam feathered from roof vents into the February air, and the contrast struck Aiko at once. Outside, the raw Midwestern wind. Inside, a building warm enough for men to work in shirt sleeves. An MP in a wool overcoat and helmet waved them down from the truck bed. His carbine hung easy on its sling. Not menacing, only present. A foreman with a pencil behind his ear spoke fast English and pointed. Impatient, but not hostile. One of the German POWs already on the line translated in clipped phrases. No touching with dirty gloves. Bottles in 12s, paper caps on straight. If break, you tell. He tapped a crate, then his watch, making it clear the plant ran on time. Aiko followed the flow. Clean bottles came along a metal track, faintly warm from washing. Workers set them into wooden or wire carriers. At the end, a simple press sealed each mouth with a round paper cap, stamped with the dairy's name. The sound was delicate. Click, click. So unlike the crash of supplies she remembered in the Pacific. Milk, white and whole, in glass, in winter, for civilians. It felt extravagant. Next to her, the older Japanese woman's mitten slipped and a bottle wobbled. The foreman's head snapped around. The MP's eyes tracked over. For a moment, Aiko saw how quickly this privilege could vanish. One complaint, and they would be sent back behind wire, replaced by men more used to this work. She steadied the bottle with bare fingers, ignoring the cold. "Like this," she murmured in Japanese, guiding the woman's hands to seat the cap flat. The foreman grunted approval, already turning away. As the crates stacked higher, Aiko realized these were the very bottles she had seen on American porches. The line here, the punctual truck, the guarded POWs. This was what made that casual trust possible. Next, she would have to see how Americans received it. The first farm sat low against the wind, its porch half shoveled, drifts piled against the steps. The truck stopped with a hiss of brakes, and the MP climbed down first, scanning the yard, the barn, the road. He pointed with 2 fingers to the crate nearest Aiko. She understood. Carry, place, return. No wandering, no curiosity. She lifted the wire carrier. The glass clinked softly, bright against the dull morning. Her breath smoked as she climbed the steps. From inside the house came a sound she knew now. An American woman moving through a kitchen. Pots, cupboard doors, a radio voice reading weather for Boone, Ames, Des Moines, as if those names were the only world. Aiko rapped once on the frame, not fully opening the door. She waited. "Just set it right there, honey," the woman called, voice cheerful, distracted. She did not come to the door. She did not ask who it was. Somewhere behind her, a child laughed. For a heartbeat, Aiko froze. In Saipan, a door like this would have been barred, watched, precious. Here, the enemy girl could stand unguarded on the threshold with food in her hands. The MP remained in the yard, trusting her as the woman did. She eased the door open a hand's width, enough to feel the wave of heat. Coffee, soap, wet wool. A radio sat on the counter, brown casing, dial glowing. Coats hung on a peg, small and large. She set the bottles down exactly where the voice had said, straightening them so the paper caps faced outward, the English stamps neat. "Thank you," the woman called again. Aiko stepped back, closing the door to the crack it had been. Disbelief thinned her breath. This was not decadence. It was something calmer, more dangerous to old stories, routine. If Americans could afford to trust like this, then the broadcasts she would hear next had to matter. The second farm on their route had a side entry that opened straight into a mudroom, and beyond it, the kitchen. Today the wind cut so hard across the fields that the MP let the women step just inside while he checked something with the driver. Warmth closed around Aiko like cloth. The radio was on. It wasn't music. A male voice, calm and unexcited, read a list. County names, temperatures, road conditions. Then, almost lazily, milk price holding, deliveries unaffected, church notices for Sunday. The English rolled past her like water, but certain words struck. Milk. Sunday. Des Moines. She had heard milk at the dairy. Now she heard it here too. One system, speaking from different mouths. She edged no farther than the mat, Another Japanese woman, Kiku, tugged her sleeve in warning. "Don't stare," she whispered in Japanese. "They think we like it here. They will stop sending us." Aiko lowered her eyes, but she kept listening. The voice mentioned butterfat, a term she did not know, and rail, and shipment east. This was not the speech of a nation bled white. It was housekeeping for a continent. The farmer's wife passed through with a basket of laundry, barely glancing at them. "You girls all right there?" she said, as if they were hired hands. The MP, standing in the doorway now, jerked his head. "Back out." On the porch again, cold slapping her cheeks, Aiko looked at the truck loaded with identical crates. The radio, the prices, the weather, the Sunday notices. They were why the bottles could wait outside untouched. America trusted its own order. If Sunday was important enough to announce, then seeing an American Sunday would tell her even more. Sunday came with bad roads and a wet, half-frozen snow that stuck to boots. The truck groaned up the lane anyway. Iowa, Aiko had learned, did not stop deliveries for much. The MP looked at the sky, at the slick porch, and made a decision that bent rules without breaking them. Inside, just the entry, till it lets up. The farmer's wife was already in a dark wool dress, hair pinned, an open Bible on the table. A pot of coffee steamed. Children clattered through in stockings, being told to slow down. No one paused because enemy women stepped into the mudroom. That was the shock. The ritual continued at its own tempo. "Hang your coats there," the woman said, pointing to pegs, as if they belonged to no one. Aiko didn't dare. She only brushed snow from her sleeves. The radio was on low, a hymn followed by a local announcement about service times. Sunday. From the kitchen door, Aiko saw layers of preparation. Shoes lined up to be polished, a pan of something reheated from the night before, the husband shrugging into his good coat. There was no hiding of food, no covering of valuables. The MP stood where he could see them, carbine muzzle down, at ease. Kiku whispered, "We should look down." But Aiko watched. This, she understood, was what made the milk on weekdays make sense. A people who repeated small orders of life whether war was near or not. If their enemy stood in the hallway, they kept repeating. "Roads are bad," the wife said to the MP. "They can wait till you drive back." So they waited, snow sliding off their boots onto the mat, wrapped in coffee smell and hymn fragments. Aiko let it sink in. This was not softness. It was steadiness. And if a storm trapped them here longer, she wanted to hear what the radio would say next. By mid-morning, the storm stopped being snow and became a wall. The truck couldn't risk the road back to camp, so the MP accepted the farmer's offer. They can stay in the kitchen till it eases. He stayed too, posted by the back door, coat open, carbine within arm's reach. The windows were filmed with ice. The world outside was just white noise. The radio, though, was clear. "Milk deliveries will continue. No interruption on account of weather. Butterfat standard remains." The announcer's voice was unhurried, almost bored. He spoke of trains moving feed, of government buying excess, of men returning from war and taking up farms again. A nation Aiko had been told was overextended was calmly arranging breakfast for millions in a blizzard. Kiku sat stiffly on a chair, eyes on her lap, as if looking too long at the warm American stove would stain her. Another woman glanced at the MP, anxious. Aiko stood near the counter, not crossing into the family's path, hands folded, listening hard. The farmer came in, stamping snow from his boots. "Roads are shut clear to town," he said to his wife. "Radio says give it a day." She nodded, poured him coffee. No panic, no hoarding. The bottles they delivered sat by the door like always. Aiko felt the break inside her. Japan's cities had burned, ships had sunk, Rations had thinned until even nurses went hungry. Here the enemy could announce, on air, that standards would hold, that milk would come, that Sunday would still happen. The MP glanced at them. "You ladies will be going back soon as it passes," he said, almost conversational. Aiko lowered her eyes in acknowledgement, but in her mind she was already carrying the scene back to the barracks. Someone there would not want to hear it. The barracks stove ticked as it cooled, throwing off the last of its heat. Outside, the wind still drove snow across the campyard, but inside the women spoke in low, careful Japanese. Lights out was past. The MP in the hall would hear only volume, not words. Kiku leaned over from the neighboring bunk. Her face in the dimness was harder than it had been in the kitchen. "You listened too long today," she said. "You were smiling." "I was warm," Aiko answered, keeping her voice level. "Anyone would—" "That radio is not for us," Kiku cut in. "We go home. We must remember who burned our cities." There was no hatred in it, only a tight grief, the kind that had lived through firestorms and shortages and now refused to be charmed by a full American pantry. On the lower bunk, the older woman with bandaged fingers murmured agreement. "They will ask in Japan how we were treated. If we say it was good, they will say we forgot, that we liked the enemy." Aiko folded her hands under the GI blanket. She could have said, "They delivered milk in a blizzard. They kept promises to their own people. They even shared warmth with us." But she heard how it would sound, as if she were grateful, as if defeat had made her soft. "I will tell the truth," she said instead. Kiku's eyes narrowed. "Too much truth. They will think you helped them." Silence settled. The stove popped. From another barracks came faint male voices. Aiko stared at the rafters. She could not unsee the radio, the calm voice, the milk by the door. But now she knew. Carrying that memory would cost her currency among her own. And tomorrow, if Americans complained, the camp would be watching for any sign of overfamiliarity. It happened 2 days after the storm, when roads were clear and tempers were too. The truck had just backed up to the dairy loading bay when Aiko saw him. A thick-coated local farmer, cap pulled low, talking fast to the foreman. His hand chopped toward the truck, toward the POW women. The foreman shrugged, pointed at the MP. The tone was not friendly. The MP called, "Hey you, Nakamura." He tapped the truck bed. Down. She jumped. To the ground, boots crunching on salt. The air was blade cold again. The farmer looked at her with the frank, measuring eyes of someone who had lost boys in the war and was not ready to watch the enemy stroll up to his neighbor's doors. "She going right up on porches?" he asked the MP. "Folks don't like it. Boys ain't got sugar, but they got milk? For her?" "It's POW labor, Hank," the MP said, weary. "Geneva. We got to show we treat 'em decent." "Decent ain't the same as cozy." Aiko couldn't follow every word, but porch, folks, like it, she caught. Her chest tightened. This was what Kiku had warned her about, but from the other side. The MP turned to her, slowed his speech. "Some people don't want you go inside. You understand? You can set here." He pointed to the porch rail outside the door. "And they take in. You do that, okay?" She nodded at once. "Hi, I set here." She mimed placing a crate on a step, hands open, backing away. The farmer watched her closely. Her quick agreement seemed to take some heat out of him. "Long as they don't get ideas," he muttered. "Long as folks see we ain't spoiling 'em." The MP made a note on his clipboard, probably for superiors or inspectors. Aiko stepped back toward the truck, relief mixing with something stranger. She had just defended, in her small way, the American delivery pattern, not because she belonged here, but because she wanted that quiet promise to stay. Tomorrow, they would come with clipboards to check all this. They were lined up before the administrative hut while frost still smoked off the parade ground. A U.S. officer in a clean overcoat stood with two civilians, one with a Red Cross armband, the other with a leather folder, clipboards, pens. Behind them, the MP from the dairy run waited, cap low, carbine slung. This was the day complaints were either believed or dismissed. Nakamura Aiko, the officer read, female POW, assigned dairy farm detail. Any issues? The MP shook his head. No, sir. Follows orders. Knows the route. Civilians had concerns. We adjusted delivery point. No further trouble. The Red Cross man looked up from his notes, curious at the sight of a Japanese woman in U.S. issue wool. She's part of the milk distribution? Yes, sir. Light labor. Within Geneva. He made a small approving noise and wrote. That was it, Aiko thought. All the warmth of kitchens, all the radio voices, the blizzard, the farmer's wife in her Sunday dress, reduced to light labor within Geneva. But it also meant protection. They were walked past the truck so the officials could see. Crates were stacked cleanly, bottles capped straight, labels facing out. The MP opened the tailgate to show there was no pilfering, no broken glass. Aiko stood just behind him, hands folded, posture exact. She kept her eyes lowered, but not sullen. The line between disciplined and resentful was thin. Good evidence, the officer said. Locals are watching. Let's keep showing them we handle POWs properly. Evidence. Aiko let the word settle. Her presence on that truck, in those kitchens, would become part of an American story about fairness. It was not her story, not the way she would tell it in Japan. But because they were writing it this way, the milk would keep coming, and she would keep seeing it. When the clipboards closed and the visitors left, the MP just jerked his thumb toward the truck. All right, let's run the route. And with the arrangement secured, there was nothing between her and the next winter morning when she would lift the crate alone. The sky was still iron dark when the truck turned up the lane. Snow, trampled yesterday, had frozen into ridges. Aiko's breath came out in hard bursts as she jumped down. The MP adjusted his scarf and stayed by the tailgate, eyes on the house. He didn't need to remind her of the complaint. It was in the way he watched. She took the crate anyway. The metal handle bit through her mitten. 6 bottles, caps stamped, glass faintly misted. She climbed the porch steps slowly so they wouldn't clink. Inside, through the door seam, came the same sounds she knew now. Stove heat, a woman moving, a radio man talking about temperatures in Iowa City, and deliveries unaffected. Aiko knocked once. Just set it by the kitchen door, honey, the woman called, exactly as weeks ago. No checking the window. No asking the MP. The line repeated like a liturgy. Relief and something like pride rose together. Aiko opened the door only as far as needed, let the wash of warm, coffee-scented air touch her face, and set the bottles down neat, labels outward, caps straight. Behind her, the radio voice mentioned milk again, calm over crackle. She stepped back, closing the door to the same narrow crack, leaving no wet footprint farther than the mat. When she turned, the MP was watching, but his shoulders had loosened. She had done it the American way, precise, unobtrusive, on time. On the porch, in the killing cold, Aiko understood. The delivery was not about her. It would have happened for any household in any weather. But today, the enemy had carried it, and no one had stopped her. She handed the empty crate to the MP and climbed back onto the truck, guarding the warmth of that line in her chest. Next would come the order to go home. The orders came on a Thursday, typed on paper that crackled in the cold. Names, numbers, destinations. The sergeant read them out in front of the admin hut, while the flag snapped overhead. Nakamura Aiko. Detail ends. Prepare for transport. So it was ending. Not dramatically. Not with accusation. Just with Army paperwork. Back in the women's barracks, the talk was immediate and sharp. We must remember the bombings. We must tell them. We worked hard. We must not say we were made soft. Kiku spoke the loudest. For her, going home meant re-entering a world where capture was still shame, and where gratitude to the enemy could be misread as betrayal. Aiko folded what little she had. U.S.-issue wool, spare mittens, the small gifts of camp life. Then, when no one watched, she took from her coat pocket a round, flattened paper cap she had saved from a chipped bottle at the dairy. The foreman had let her keep it because it could not be reused. She smoothed it now and slid it between the pages of a small notebook she used for English words: milk, Sunday, weather, price. Outside, trucks moved. Men called to each other. Another batch of prisoners was being processed. The MP from the dairy run passed the window and lifted his hand in a short, professional acknowledgement. She returned it just as briefly. They had never spoken much. They had not needed to. In the evening, the camp clerk explained through an interpreter. They would go by truck to a rail point, then to a port, then across the ocean with others. "You will tell your government we treated you according to convention," he said. Aiko bowed. She would. But she would also tell herself about the morning radio and the milk in the snow, even if no one else wanted to hear it, and she hoped, one last time, to see the porch on Sunday. Sunday was bright and hard with cold, the kind that made every sound carry. The camp yard was busy earlier than usual. 2 trucks were already warming, exhaust drifting. Aiko, packed and buttoned into her borrowed coat, climbed onto the dairy truck one last time. The MP gave no speech. "Same route," he said. "Then you go." The farmhouse lane was familiar now, ruts frozen where the tires always ran. As they pulled up, church bells from a distant town carried thinly on the air. Of course, Sunday. Of course they rang whether an enemy sat in the truck or not. Aiko took the crate. The motion was in her muscles now. Lift, balance, protect the glass. On the porch, the door was not locked. Inside, the radio was already on, tuned to the same kind of program. Weather, notices, milk. And by the door, just inside, the farmer's wife had set out 2 extra jars of something wrapped in cloth, then, thinking better of it, moved them out of sight. Rules were rules. "Just set it right there, honey," came the call. The same words, unchanged. She set the bottles down, straightened them, and let herself look one heartbeat longer at the kitchen, the pegged coats, the Bible on the table, the heat shimmering above the stove. This was the room that had broken her certainties. This was the sound that had told her America would keep feeding itself. Back at the truck, the engine was already idling for their return. The MP glanced at her, then at the farmhouse, and seemed to understand something of it. "You're heading out today," he said. "Good luck to you." Aiko touched the pocket where the paper milk cap lay flat. On the long road to the port, on the ship, and in whatever small house awaited her in a ruined Japan, she would have proof, not of American kindness exactly, but of American repetition. A quiet promise left on a porch, even for people who were not meant to stay.